Let's switch gears here and talk a little bit about language here in Quebec. Benoit Dubreuil was appointed Quebec's first commissioner of the French language on March 1st. He's got a 7-year mandate and quite the lofty challenge, protecting French in a Quebec that's rapidly changing thanks to immigration and a population that often wants to learn English, and finding the right balance on a subject that has stumped Quebec governments for decades. It's our pleasure to welcome Benoit Dubreuil onto the program. Commissioner, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Elias.
Isn't that
Very
great?
happy to be here.
Isn't that great to have that title? I'm commissioner. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not the first time. A few years ago, I was also commissioner, Commission d'évaluation de l'enseignement collégial. So it's my kind of second life as a commissioner. But it's a new commissioner position.
It's a great title. Let's get to the task at hand. How do you view your job?
Yeah. So just to take a step back with the adoption of Bill 96 last year, the Conseil supérieur de la langue française that existed for 45 years has been abolished. So it was a conseil that was reporting to the minister responsible for French language. And they have created this new position that takes some of the mandate of the previous council. But the difference is that I will report to the National Assembly instead of reporting to a minister. So it's really a position that is above government. And it's a position that is really there to be, some people have said, watchdog of language policy. So it's really to make sure that government is implementing the Charter of French language in a way that is efficient, in a way that is effective and relevant.
How French does Quebec need to be?
That's a very good question. I don't think I've been asked this question before. The situation of language in Quebec is complex. It is evolving also as society is evolving. You've mentioned immigration. I think you mentioned immigration. Maybe we can also mention digital transformation. So there are changes in people's language repertoire. And I think at the end of the day, there's no single answer. It needs to be a democratic debate, right? Depending how we adjust our behavior to the world in which we live. And there is no single answer to this. People can have different views, different perspectives. And I really think it is up to politicians at the end of the day to have these debates in the National Assembly. But what I like is to have debates that are based on facts and that we don't do as if policy are effective when they are not. And that's really where I see my added value in strengthening this factual basis on which politicians will have their debates.
So let's talk a little bit about facts here, right? So basically all children of immigrants go to French school. There are a couple of tiny loopholes that are available, but all all children of immigrants go to French school. 85% of Anglos in the English system are telling their children, sending their children to an immersion program or a bilingual program. Many Anglos send their children into the French system. So keeping in mind all of those things, why is there such a worry that French could disappear or will go away in Quebec when everyone seems to be on board with at least learning in French?
I think what you say is important in that we have made tremendous progress since the past few decades. So it is true now that we have reached level of knowledge among immigrants and children of immigrants that we did not have before. If we look at the situation right now, it is also true that the immigrant population is growing very fast, especially this year, especially if we consider non-permanent resident. So the situation, I think, is contrasted, right? When you look at immigrants right now, I think we have approximately 60% who use primarily French at work, primarily French in their daily life. And on the top of that, in addition to that, you have another maybe 20% that will use French to varying degrees in their life. And then maybe 20% that do not know French and that primarily work and live in English. So it is not bad. So we're starting from a strong foundation. Same thing. Also, you mentioned the situation among Anglophones where the level of bilingualism has been increasing very fast over the past few decades. But it's still the case that among immigrants, where the population is growing very fast, French is still underrepresented by comparison to the overall population. English is still overrepresented. So what is the right balance at the end of the day? I don't have a magic number. Maybe if I can throw in a number, let's say that if we had 85% of immigrants who were opting for French since a few decades, I'm not sure we would have the discussion. I'm not even sure that my position would exist.
So, Commissioner, I guess what I want to get to is, I think there's too much focus on the immigrants, not enough focus on the children of immigrants who are all going to French school. Like I go for a walk in Côte des Neiges. I walk by the schoolyard. It's people, visible minorities. They're all speaking French, right? Kids, they're all speaking French. So do you find sometimes it's being used, immigration might be being used as a boogeyman when at the end of the day, the children are going into the French schools?
Yeah, I think the two are important because immigration is growing very fast. And we also know, like since the beginning of the year 2000, that children of immigrants who grow in family and community where English is the vehicular language, even if they grow to French school, they are very much attracted to English way more than people whose parents, for instance, use French as vehicular language at work and in public life. But what you say is important, and definitely it is true that thanks to the application of the Charter of French Language in primary school, in high school, definitely language is way more present. One of the things that I would like to look at is where we are exactly now with the use of language among children of immigrants. I think it has been studied like from a qualitative perspective by many researchers, but I've not seen a very good quantitative study recently. I know we had a number of them in the early 2000s, but the world has changed dramatically, especially with the digital transformation of kids' life, even among Francophones, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of young Francophones children, even my children, they can spend hours every day watching streaming English video on their iPhone. I mean, the world is changing very fast, and the relationship of people with language is also changing very fast. So those are the things that I will also be able to study. But you're right. I don't think we have a complete picture of what is going on among younger people, and that's what we need to look at.
We're with Benoit Dubreuil, Quebec's first commissioner of the French language. Just on the digital aspect of things, I will never forget the day I opened up La Presse Plus. So I opened up the tablet, right? And there's an opinion column, someone complaining that Tinder, all the profiles are in English, right? And you talk about the digital transformation. And here's the thing, Monsieur Dubreuil. I like Francophones in their 20s. All the Francophones I know in their 20s, they want to speak English. They're upset they didn't get enough English schooling growing up. So how do you deal with that factor? What happens to a Quebec where Francophones are all bilingual? What happens in that Quebec?
Yeah. I think it really raised a question. Like I'll take myself as an example. I did learn English. I did learn English for all kinds of reasons because I wanted to have access to specialized content when I was doing my PhD, because it was easier to travel. Those are the reasons why I learned English. But at the same time, I do not want the fact that I learn English to be used then to say, oh, now that you learn English, you're the person who is going to talk English every time that we need communication to happen, right? So I also worked several years in federal government, for instance, working with Francophones and Anglophones, and very often there is this assumption that as Francophones are so good in English, then we are going to do everything in English. But I'm not okay with that, right? It's not for me to always make the efforts to work in the second language. So that's the thing. That's a situation to all linguistic minority are faced, right? They do invest in learning a language that is more useful, more influential in some way. But at the same time, as they do this, they do not necessarily consent to use it all the time. And that's why we need some form of language planning, language policy that needs to be democratically decided and discussed.
You're on CJAD 800 right now, number one English radio station, right? So clearly you're trying to touch base with Anglophones by coming on this station. So what do you say to the Anglo community? By the way, the Anglophone community has been here for centuries, right? This is not like we just showed up, right? There's been an Anglophone community in Quebec. On the island of Montreal, at times, Anglophones were the majority, if we look at the history at one point. It's not been the case. But what do you say to an Anglophone community that feels like, hey, we've been here for a while, we are a part of Quebec, and that sometimes initiatives that come from the Quebec government, it feels to them that it's an attack on their community. What do you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, people don't need to agree on everything in a democracy, that's for sure. At the same time, I think we need to recognize that things have dramatically evolved in the Anglophone communities and efforts have been made and things have changed in the English-speaking community over time. At the same time, I think the government of Quebec is also committed to do things in a way that will not create useless hurdles for Anglophones in implementing the new act. There is a commitment to respect the right to respect the situation and the specificity of the English-speaking community. And then it will be a matter of implementation, right? How do we do this? Are we effective in doing this? Can we achieve our objective in a way that does not create useless hurdles? I mean, at the same time, it's obvious we are talking about language policy. Language goes at the center of people's everyday life. So we cannot change linguistic trends at the aggregate level of a society without it to mean something specific in people's life, right? So there will be some adjustment. At the same time, will those adjustments take us where we want to go in a way that is efficient, that is fair, or will it be just hurdles for people? That's what we will need to debate democratically. Right?
We'll end off this interview talking about numbers, and specifically, what numbers are you going to look at? Because sometimes I hear the government mention, mother tongue, but mother tongue will never go up if you have immigration, right? Then they talk about the language spoken at home, language at work. Is there a figure, a number that you, as the first commissioner, is going to be super focused on?
Yeah. I don't think we have like one specific magic numbers, like the question of language at home, first language. Those numbers are being looked at by specialists since they exist, right? But at the same time, since maybe 20, 25 years, the number of indicators has grown dramatically. And we can have a much more complex discussion and much more complex analysis of the situation. We know that the situation is complex for a whole bunch of people, right? People do use different language in their everyday life, sometimes a little bit more predominantly one language than the other. I think it's really the overall picture that matters, and you cannot get the overall picture with only one magic number and one magic indicator, right?
Benoit Dubreuil is Quebec's first commissioner of the French language. Thank you for being gracious with your time and accepting our invitation. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a great pleasure.
All right. We'll talk again, hopefully real soon. That's Benoit Dubreuil.